Hello, my name is Jaakko Husa. I am professor in law and globalization at the University of Helsinki. I would like to thank Diritti Comparative and Giuseppe Martineco for the possibility to talk about my book, Introduction to Comparative Law. The story behind the book is slightly complicated because the first version came out in Finnish in 1998. I wrote that because in the mid-1990s, I became interested in comparative study of law, but I really didn't understand what was going on there, what kind of methods were used, what was that all about. So the first version of the Introduction to Comparative Law was rather sort of a rough, bit of a skeleton version. But then 15 years later, 2015, the second Finnish edition came out, and that was sort of a double size in comparison to the earlier version. Then I started to think that perhaps I should write also an international version for a broader audience. So I started to take away that were particularly interesting to Finns, and then I started to add their material that I thought would be interesting to others than non-Finns or others. So the first English version came out 2015, published by Hard Publishing, and it was called New Introduction to Comparative Law. Now, this version that came out in May this year is called only Introduction to Comparative Law. The book is rather simple in its structure. I first present what comparative law is, historically speaking, how we define the area of the discipline, why do we compare to begin with, but then also I go through different kind of obstacles and difficulties that are typical for those who do comparative study of law. And I also go through different kind of approaches, the typical approaches that are there, functional, structural, systemic, but also post-colonial and cultural. There are also shorter chapters on macro comparative law, how to classify and group legal systems, chapter on legal evolution, and then a new edition of 2023 has also a conclusion. The previous English version didn't have a conclusion at all. So there's lots of stuff in the book, and in short presentation, it makes no sense to try to go through all that. But what I can do is I try to highlight two of the key underlying ideas behind the book. First is pluralism. Pluralism concerns two dimensions. First, substance, and second, methods. Substance-wise, it was important for me to try to expand beyond Europe, beyond the West, and also beyond the narrow constricts of private law. And methodologically, also, the underlying idea behind the book is that I try to abandon the idea of one size fits all. Instead, the book is built on an idea of toolbox. And that means that there are lots of different kind of approaches available when we do comparative study of law. And we can't decide really beforehand what kind of method is good, what fits. So we need to start from the research problem. And that's because research problems are different, systems are different, our interest areas are different. So we can't decide beforehand what kind of method we can use. We have to tailor the method so that it fits to our research program or project. Second element that I think is important is realism. And this is not legal theoretical realism, but rather it has to do with the fact that, unfortunately, in my view at least, much of the comparative law scholarship is overly complicated. It tends to be very, very abstract. So I try to be inviting instead of doing some gatekeeping. I try to write the book in such a manner that it would be understandable, perhaps also inviting for those who are more doctrinal types or loyalty types. So that is important. So this is not about grand theories about comparative law, about otherness or something like that. It just tries to be sort of a more commonsensical in the sense that it presents that, look, these are the approaches and these are the difficulties and these are the ways how you can try to overcome those difficulties. And in the end, there are a few points in the conclusion I underline. Perhaps two of those could be mentioned. First one is inquisitive humility. And this means simply that we need to be aware of the fact that comparative law as a form of research has limits. And we probably never really understand foreign law, foreign legal system as well as our own. And that is something that we need to take into account. So we need to be realistic when we do this. We need to have this inquisitive humility. We need to understand that there are limits, what we can do. Linguistic limits, limits of getting research material, limits of understanding foreign legislation, foreign case law, foreign legal literature. And perhaps I could end this by underlining one of the key facets which I believe is important for everyone who does comparative law. That is a scholarly courage. This means that despite the difficulties that we know that are there, we need to just step and go forward, because the book is, and my belief, my argument is really that comparative law is not something that you can learn beforehand. You have to engage in comparative law research before difficulties start to emerge. And only then this theoretical literature, literature on methods and approaches and difficulties and solutions to them become meaningful. Before that, it's all theoretical. So it's important that all comparators try to go forward and try to really understand foreign law and try to compare what are the differences, what are the similarities, and what are possible explanations to those similarities or differences that we find.